Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the Con Hour. And again, it's a dreary day outside, rain out here in the Houston area. But like I said, started a garden, so it definitely helps. And other than that, we had a great interview last night with Katie Kachanas, who just loved everything she had to say. And remember, this next weekend, next Saturday, I'll be at DKG. There we go. Adding music to the show. Next weekend, we'll be at DKG and we'll be conducting a live podcast there. Weekend after that, we'll have CJ Peterson on, an author, a publisher. She'll be great to have on as an interview. And the weekend after that, we have DC, the Brain Supreme from Tag Team, which y'all know him from Womp. There it is. So looking forward to that as well. And May 28th, nothing set final yet, but we're probably going to have Comic Palooza with some of their coordinators on here discussing their show coming up in July. But today we have Dan Christoffers from DKG Games, and we're going to discuss a little bit about creating games and the process and the length of time that it goes to take through with that. So, hey, Dan, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going, GM? It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, on the games, how would you start out creating a game?
Well, it varies at this point. I've had a lot of game. I think the last count I had was around 250 different game ideas that I've worked on. Various stages, of course. But sometimes it starts out where I'll just have this idea or this theme. Like some kind of fun idea of tabletop experiences. What would it be like to do this or to do that? And so I'll start coming up with working on mechanics that fit that theme. And then sometimes I'll just be thinking about game mechanics in general, and I'll come up with some idea what if this did that? And then I think, well, what kind of thematic setting would that be appropriate to to use for an experience? But generally, by and large, I just try and make my games, I try and think about the immersion of it, what the player's going to experience when they're sitting at the table.
And a lot of it is storytelling. Would you like to explain some of those story? You actually have one game that you created that I've seen at Dragon's Lair and a few other places. Would you like to tell about that game a little bit?
The
story behind it? Yes.
Sure. Well, Tavern Masters is the first game that we've put out that takes place in my fantasy setting, which is the world of Destiny. I actually have a couple of other games I made before that. They're just still, at home, and they haven't gone out to the world yet. But I've always loved fantasy. And so Tavern Masters was, to have this idea of this game where, I had actually started with the mechanics on that one first. And then a friend of mine had been like, well, what if you're running a tavern, because, we always love role playing. And so, normally a good role playing game, a classic style story starts out in the tavern, a group of adventurers coming together and a quest falling upon them. So we were like, well, what if you're the one running the tavern instead? And you're just trying to bring in these adventurers and, mages and soldiers and thugs and all that stuff. And so, it's kind of worked on that. So we'd sit around, I'd be like, okay, so what's some of the stuff you'd expect to see in a tavern in a fantasy world? Oh, well, there's this. Oh, well, there's that, But, so in the game, you're each player's running their own tavern. So by day, you're buying goods and hiring staff from the tavern deck, so you could, I need some, rock bottom ale. It's the cheap ale, or some elven wine, some good wine, and then at night you're drawing patrons, and they all have all the basic patrons have wants, they want ale or they want mead or they want food or any drink. And so if you have those things in your tavern, you can play them and they give you gold and they go away. Some of them have likes, so maybe they like games or they like entertainers. If you have that in your tavern, then they'll stay next round, and they'll keep staying as long as you have that. And so you're kind of building this engine of making money with these regular customers. There's also noble patrons. You can't play them normally because they don't sully themselves with the rabble. But if you have certain items like the mutton or the stinky cheese or the aged brandy, they allow you to play noble patrons, and then noble patrons give you 2 gold rather than 1. So. But I mean, it's just basic, your basic mercantilism game, but it's the fun theme of, you have, oh, well, I played Elven wine, so now these different people that like wine come in. Look, there's a wizard, there's a scholar, that kind of thing.
So are you set with tabletop gaming where you roll the dice, or is it more like card gaming like Magic?
Tavern Masters is a card game. And actually, when it comes to Magic, Magic is one of the many inspirations for it, but mostly because, like, if you've played Magic, like one of the fun things in Magic is to build a deck full of lots of different possibilities of combos. Like if I get this card and this card, it does this cool thing. If I get this card and this card and this other card, it does this other cool thing. And so that's part of the idea behind Tavern Masters is there's just tons of combos you can make, but it's all from the same deck. It's not, no, everyone doesn't have their own deck. And so you never know what you're going to draw and have access to, but then you can make combos to make more money and do other cool stuff.
And the other thing is most of these games are storytelling. And how would you apply that? Like, say, I'm an author and I might be interested in putting one of my books up as a game. How would we go about doing that if we wanted to get with you?
Oh, well, generally, taking some time for me to get to know the lore of the world and to know first of all, just the general feel and atmosphere that the world presents. But then to find out, well, okay, so, what experience are you wanting the player to go through? Because, as an author, you're writing the experience you want your reader to have. You're putting them on the adventure, whether it be first person, third person, whatever. You're directing their experience with words. So I try and find a way to say, okay, well, what experience are you trying to direct them through with words? What journey are you wanting them to take? And then I try and find a way to match that to give the players that kind of journey, so that they feel like a protagonist in your books. That is, of course, unless, for instance, an author wants the antagonist experience for their player or whatever, or even just some kind of spectator thing. But the idea is to figure out what kind of experience you want the player to have and build from there. And then try and make sure that the mechanics, like especially with working with an author, I want to make sure that the mechanics fit the theme, not vice versa, I mean, of course, they should both fit each other, but like sometimes a game starts with good mechanics and sometimes a game starts with a fun theme. And so for working with like material that's out there with an IP that someone's working on, the theme has to be the starting place, because you want to make sure to carry across that experience. It doesn't matter whether I think it'd be cool to make a rondel game where you have like a little wheel that, changes every week, or I want to make a dice game. That doesn't matter. What matters is the experience, and then let the mechanics interpretate that.
Now, a lot of this, I guess you can also add in the comic book aspect because a lot of these games also have the visual effects. Can you explain some of the artist work or who you might have for artists? Or
well, I've worked with a number of different really nice artists. Initially, the base game and the first few expansions were all the same artists, but with scheduling and there was more demands on his time. And so, I just had to start working with some other artists too, because he was just busy. And, but like, I always love, for me, I always love letting the author or the artist, like kind of, I tell them a bit about the world. I tell them a bit about the feeling. Usually if I can, I'll try and find a way to play the game with them. Especially if there's just like, they're doing all the art for it, but I'll generally kind of tell them a lot of the different, the feel of the setting, and then I'll let them kind of interpret the cards. And if they have any questions, they can always ask me and we can, talk about it. So I make sure that, like, rather than tell them, okay, well, I want this guy to look like this with this hair and these clothes. Instead, I'm like, okay, well, you're like, oh, you're drawing a pirate. Well, here's what pirates do in my world, and here's kind of the general subculture of pirates, and then I let them kind of interpret it and kind of run wild with it. Every once in a while I'll be like, hey, can you throw this little thing in here, or can you make this thing do this, just for certain extra little flavor bits in the world, because there's lots of lore to the world already. And then sometimes I'll take some of the little bits from the art and create special things for the world, that gives it more relevance too. So
Okay. And the other thing on that is, I mean, everybody's going to have some sort of financial aspect. And I know a lot of people are trying to do Kickstarter right now, which I think Kickstarter, yeah, some are good, some are bad, but it's very hard to self-promote also, especially during these times.
yeah.
So how would you finance a project like that? Or how would the person coming up with the idea of the game get with you and finance something like that?
Well, I mean, like with Kickstarter, that's one of the good ways to crowdfund, to source something through crowdfunding. But it depends on what you're going for. With authors and with movie people and stuff like that, you can come at them with just some ideas and some concepts and a few photos or whatever. But the reality for people that are making board games on Kickstarter is a bit different, because as much as it would be lovely to be that actual thing where, hey, I got this idea, but I need good art and I need this and I need manufacturing, no one's going to pay you for an idea on Kickstarter. Like at this point, you basically have to have most or all of the art done and basically kind of be ready to go to manufacturing. Because even if you had everything ready and you pressed the button to start manufacturing right then, it's going to take at least 2 or 3 months, if not more. Like if they started that moment, if they already had all the files, which is never the case. I mean, like there's always new things that come up in manufacturing, even if you've had it planned for months and months or whatever. And so, realistically takes at least a good 6 months to go from like, okay, here, manufacturing company, go ahead and get it started. Here's the money, to, oh, it's just arriving in off the boats. And if a game takes too long on Kickstarter, people just get up in arms. And I mean, I understand, but it's basically Kickstarter for some people is a pre-order system. When it comes to tabletop games, they treat it like a pre-order rather than like hey, we're funding an idea. So, for authors and stuff, it's kind of a different story than for board game manufacturers, publishers, just because there's this expectation. It wasn't as bad before, but there's so many games on there now that like there's just this plethora of games, that it's impossible for small guys to really get noticed, except if you just happen to hit the right thing and get on board the hype train.
Well, with something like that, I guess Kickstarter is almost like a reward system for the people who back it also. Do you give the artwork or the games or both?
Well, with projects like books and movies, there you can give away trinkets and like, staff shirts or whatever, but with games, I mean, like I said, they basically look at it as a pre-order. So if they're pledging on your project, unless they're just pledging a few bucks, they want a copy of the game basically at a cheaper than retail price, and then of course, there's the expectation of extras and stuff like that. Now I love making promo cards. I love doing all the little extras and stuff like that. So it's not a problem, it's just, but with a game, like you really have to have all the art done and stuff. So that means you're paying for art out of pocket, and when you need, 30, 50 images, for a game, it can get a little pricey,
It starts adding up for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some big games that like are great, solid board games that are just big. There's a lot going on with them. And they've been ready for a couple of years now, at least, but I just haven't been able to put them out yet because it's going to take thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars just for the art, So I just finally started on one of those projects recently. As a matter of fact, started getting some of the art in for my game, Lord of the Night, Feast of Blood, where everybody's playing vampires, So, But I finally got the art started on that. But I mean, that thing's going to need like 60, 70 pieces of art or more, at least. And, so, I'm looking at, about close to 20 grand for just all the art. So it's going to take a minute for me to,
Oh, definitely.
get it all in.
Well, how did you get started in all this?
Well, as a kid, I always loved board games. When I was a little kid, I played like Monopoly and Scrabble with my parents and stuff. And then in 1986, I think it was, this game came out at Toys R Us that I was just smitten with, called Fireball Island. And I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it or not, but I mean, it's this big, 3D board. It's got these rolling marbles that are fireballs. But you had cards you could play in it too to affect things, and that kind of always stuck with me. And then years later, when I was like 12 or 13, I got into Magic just as Magic was getting started, back in like the revised era. So, it'd been out for like 2 years, I think. And like being able to make your decks and, play with all these different kinds of cards. It was just cool, And so my friends and I, we started trying to make our own card games. In fact, the one that my friend and I worked on the most was called Imperial Colonies. It was kind of a fantasy setting based on ants. So it was like ants, but like, oh, here was this swamp area and it was like Necrosia, and like, it was basically just like, imagine going into a swampy part of your backyard or, swampy part of a forest, but like then take it on the micro scale. So it's just this epic, huge, thing, because everyone's an ant, like ant wizards and ant sorcerers and ant soldiers, and
Watch out for those stepping feet.
yeah. And then but my friends and I actually also started like a little like we started programming on the computer too, so we tried to make our own games on that, but we were just using like QBasic. I think eventually we kind of got into C++ a bit, but it never really went very far, but it was something fun to do. And so my love for making games had always been there. And I think about maybe 12, 13 years ago, maybe a little bit, no, more than that, because it was right after my wife and I got together. So about like almost 16 years ago, we were hanging out. I started coming up with game ideas, and just little stuff here and there. And, eventually I was like, hey, maybe I could, do this, make games. So I started designing some games, and I was looking at talking to publishers about trying to get them out there. And then I realized, I was talking with a friend of mine up in Houston, and he said, well, what are you really trying to do here? And I said, well, I love making games, but I also want to be able to feed my family. I've been disabled since 2001, not with any help from the government, mind you. So I've been trying to find careers and stuff I could do from home, and I was like, well, maybe I could start making games, but I need to make money. And he said, well, freelancers, they don't really make enough money to really support themselves for the most part. There's maybe like 3 in the world. And I said, well, like, what about Steve Jackson? He said, well, he doesn't count. He has his own company. I'm like, okay. So maybe I need to make my own company. But, all the fun of running a business. So.
Definitely, because I do know authors, actually, because you are a small business, and it takes a lot, and you have to get out there and you have to promote yourself, and that's one of the biggest things and one of the hardest things. Can you give examples of how you might promote yourself other than Kickstarter?
Sure. Of course, like I've told you, I've never been great in that area, but I mean, like starting your own podcast is a great way. Or just having, regular casts, or audio casts. And it depends, of course, on like if you're an author, you can do a lot more of the podcast and audio cast because they've got all that lore to talk about and all the stories to talk about, Whereas with games, unless you have a bunch of lore in the games, then it's really just more about videos of gameplay. But promotions, going and talking with other people, going to conventions like I know you do. You go to a lot of conventions. And just getting out there and talking to people, meeting people, which has been hard the past year for obvious reasons, but, we are coming back into some form of normalcy, hopefully within this year. So I'm looking forward to it,
Oh, definitely. I think a lot of people are. I do know, like I said, I don't know if I said at the beginning of the show or not, but Kilgore is going on right now. That's up near the I-20 Dallas area. And of course, like I said, I did say this one, DKG in Dayton, Texas next week. And looking forward to that. I got a book signing on May 29th at Copperfield Books, or is that May 20th? I'll have to get the date. I'm pretty sure it's May 29th, whatever that Saturday is. I mean, it's all coming back for everybody, and that's one of the biggest things that people are starting to get back out there, and show your support for the local businesses, people. I mean, that's one of the big things. They had a lot of struggle last year.
Yeah.
Is there any words of advice that you would give people who might be starting something up, especially during this time?
Yeah, make sure you have a backup plan. I mean, make sure you have a backup plan. But I mean, really, just like anything, being your own boss is a double-edged sword. Because any success, that you have, yeah, it's on your shoulders. Like you made that happen. But any failures, they're also on your shoulders. You made that happen. So you have to take the good with the bad. I'd say, when you start putting yourself out there too, there's going to be a lot of people commenting and stuff, and praise is great, like take that praise to fuel you, but don't let it make you rest on your laurels. Just as like negative comments and criticism, like take all of it in as much as you can, but at the same time, don't take it personally, like don't let it dissuade you. Let it hone you. You got to carve some wood away before you can whittle something out of it.
And one of the things that I always say is, like you said, take in the negative, use it as fuel. Say, okay, this customer likes this, but this one likes that. You're not going to please everybody, but take it in as fuel, and maybe you can find a way to get in the middle. That's one of the biggest things.
It's fine tuning. I mean, for instance, I know that when I first started making games and putting them out there, like talking to people about them, getting friends and people to come over and play them, that kind of thing. There would always be a lot of suggestions. And of course, at first, I would let them go in one ear and out the other. So I was like, oh, okay, they clearly just don't understand what this game's about or what I'm going for here. They haven't spent a lot of time on it, so they don't know the ins and outs, But so it's like being a new parent for the first time. You're very protective of your baby. No one better say anything about your baby. It doesn't matter if it looks like an ugly, wrinkly mess. Like everyone better say it's pretty. And as you get more into it, as I got more into it, made more games and my skin toughened up a bit, then it would be like, I'm welcoming comments and I'm taking them in, and I'd still tell myself, well, but I still know what's best for the game, and kind of like, you got a toddler and they're going to school now, and their teachers or and principals are telling you, oh, well, your kid's kind of lacking in this area. Like, oh, I see where you could see that, but I still know what's best for my toddler, But then by the time like for me, games are now, it's like college age. It's like, all right, get out the door and see what you can do. If you do something good, someone will tell me. But you have to like grow a thick skin and realize that like if someone sits down, I can't tell you how many times I've had like some friend or other person sit down and never like not play my game yet, and I'm like, okay, here's my game, and I'm like describing, oh, it's this card game, you do this, you do that, and they'll throw something out there like, well, why don't you make it about like zombies, or why didn't you make it a dice game? Like, I don't know, why didn't I? But then I have to ask myself, I've learned to ask myself, well, why were they expecting that kind of thing, or what would make them think that would be more here? Then I have to think about, well, am I presenting my game right? Is the name off-putting to someone? Like, is it making them think that it's something that it's not? Like, so every bit of criticism has some kernel in there, some golden nugget of truth. Just take it out and learn from it.
Well, I know one of the advantages of being an author is you can have beta readers where somebody can actually go and read the book, and then they can give you their advice on the book, and maybe you can change up a little bit from there or whatnot. Do you have anything like that for the games that you create?
Well, yeah, there's alpha testing. Alpha testing is whenever, you bring it around to your friends and family, or even to a con, or to an event at a store, and you're running the game, you're explaining it to people, and then you get the feedback from that, and then once you feel like you've got it to the point where it's ready to put out there, that's when you start the beta testing, which is when you just put all the components in a box with the rules and everything, and you either let someone borrow it, or you ship it to someone, or you send it to a reviewer, or whatever. And of course, reviewers don't want beta testing. They want, like prototype products that are coming out. But I mean, just in general, beta testing is when you send it to someone and you don't tell them anything about it. You just let them read the rules and see if they can figure it out, and then that way that helps you test, well, am I explaining my rules right? Am I explaining the theme right? Did I carry across the mechanics and how they're supposed to work together, correctly? And then once you've gotten past beta testing and everyone's, pretty uproariously happy with what you got, then you start all the prototyping. Okay, well, how am I going to do the layout of the cards? And, what artists should I find? And, just the all of the pre-production buildup.
So it's definitely a long process for the production of getting a game out there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the one, there was an old quote like a long time ago when I first got into it, and it still holds true. But basically, if you have got a game idea and you've worked out all the mechanics and you've got this great theme, you are officially 1% done. Like another 95% of that is playtesting, and then that last couple of percentages where you're doing all the pre-production and layout and rules, and then marketing.
Marketing's a big one.
Yeah.
Now, earlier on the show, I put on your website, DannChristGames.com. That way, if anybody's interested, go check out his stuff. There it is right there.
Thank you.
Definitely do go check it out, see what there is. If you have any ideas for games, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, I mean, as far as like game ideas in general, like I've got a ton, but if they're like looking to have me help them make a game, just send me an email. My email's on the website. If you just like, go to Dan and stuff, or contact me through Facebook. Our Facebook is, Dan Chris Games. It's on Facebook. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, probably a few other things too that I'm just not thinking of right now. But yeah, I mean, just you can contact me through Facebook or through my email on the website, and I'll do my best to get back to you.
Well, I know you have a lot going on right now in your life personally, but do you plan on hitting the conventions this year, going back to them full force next year? What's your plan for future?
Well, this year, of course, has all of the external challenges of COVID and all that stuff, and so that's kept some conventions from reopening. But in my personal life, my wife and I had a new baby girl last July, and so we're also taking care of my mom who has dementia. So normally, my wife Crystal and our son Victor, who's about to turn 12, like they come with me to conventions, and we set up the booth, and Crystal runs the booth, and I'm out there, running the games and stuff like that. And Victor actually helps run some of the games too. He loves it. He's great at cons. But now that we have the added responsibility of taking care of mom, and she's gotten kind of, it's gotten kind of severe in the dementia, but also she's got to be here with the baby. It means that, I don't have her helping me. I don't have her to run the booth. And then my son, Victor, he should stay here too, so he can help her with the baby and mom, whenever, since I'm not here. So it just leaves me to go run the conventions, which is hard because I can't run a booth and run games and go and like talk to people and network and stuff like that. But I have some people that help me from time to time. So I'm going to try and hit a few more conventions this year. But if I do, they're going to be either like big ones that I just managed to get into, or, maybe like, one that I've been to a couple of years and I just want to, not miss out. But I think next year, either end of this year or next year, we're going to be back to hitting them hard again. And in the meantime, I'm just going to be focusing on trying to, build up more of our marketing angles and stuff so that we can get more word out there about things. I've got a couple of games in the pipeline that we just had one on Kickstarter. Sadly, it didn't succeed. Again, lack of marketing. But, I'm going to focus on, getting the word out more about that, about our upcoming ones. And just trying to kind of generally get everything else in order, try and get some of my personal life back in line, and get it, kind of resorted out so that we can, come at this, strong again. But I imagine we'll be more back in the full convention swing next year.
Well, other than your website and of course conventions, is there any place around that people can get your game, like comic shops or anything like that?
There's definitely comic shops that carry our games. We were in distribution, like worldwide distribution, for a couple of years there. But when the pandemic happened last year, a lot of the biggest distributors kind of shut their doors for a couple of months. And I was part of a consolidator group who, they kind of act as an agent, so to speak, for small independent companies like myself to the big distributors. Like whenever the big distributors shut up their warehouses for a couple of months, the consolidators were like, well, we got to, keep alive. We got to cut down, clear some warehouse space, cut down anybody that's not, doing a lot of sales right now. So my games had sold somewhat steadily, but, not a ton because, again, marketing. So they had to let me go. So for the past year now, I've been kind of weighing back and forth whether I should just start handling all of the distribution, even the wholesale and stuff myself, or whether I should just, call the distributors directly and say, hey, look, you were carrying my products. Do you still want them? Because, more and more people have been, asking, like, hey, do y'all carry Tavern Masters and stuff? And they're like, sorry, we're out, and so, the word's been getting around to, so I've had comic shops tell me, oh, I tried to order your games and they're out of stock. And so I would tell them, well, you can order directly from me, but, it's easier for them to order from the distributor because you get the free shipping and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah. That's just another example of how the pandemic has affected people, and
Yeah.
it has hurt a lot of the small businesses, and hopefully they'll be getting back on their feet.
Oh, yeah.
But I do want to say, is there any final words you'd like to give anybody?
Oh, well, I mean, for all of the authors and just anyone, any dreamer out there, I mean, I say that we dreamers are a family. We're the things that, keep the world, moving forward in a more interesting manner, like, there's tons of room for scientific developments and math and all that stuff. And all that stuff is very important and great for technological advances. But we have to advance our dreams too. We have to advance, our dreams give us new ways to think about things. They give us, new ways to approach situations and problems, whether it be like actual dreams or just, daydreaming dreams, like, the things you'd love to see happen in the world. But, the dreamers are the ones that help progress the storyline another bar or two in this grand story we all call life.
Very true. But I do want to end the show today. Yeah, it's a little bit earlier than normal, as I'm a little bit tired. I got the chemo next week, but I would like to ask people, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find us on Facebook at The Con Hour, and be happy to have you there. Other than that, I would like to say thank you for joining the show and want everybody to have a wonderful weekend.